You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Kelvin هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Happy Monday, everyone. Monday. Give me a second. I got to get the cobwebs out. Actually,
Yeah,
I woke
exactly.
up
Yeah,
this
you gotta pull the Benny Feilhaber and shake the cobwebs.
Exactly what I got to do. I was a little scared this morning when I put Twitter on for the first time. I looked at the trending topics and I saw Bob Dylan's name trending there. And anytime I see a famous rock star from the 60s name trending on Twitter nowadays.
Yeah, you're always careful.
Apparently he released his first album 55 years ago today. So that's why he's trending. But anyway, I'm not a big Dylan fan, but you still, you don't want them dead.
No, exactly. And last time I saw, I'm like you, if I see Leonard Cohen, that's how I learned the news a few months ago. I saw his name trending. I'm like, why is he trending? I know you released an album a few weeks ago, but yeah, exactly. Your mind always goes to, unfortunately, the idea of losing another great legend. And speaking of losing a great legend, good segue, Chuck Berry died in the last few days. And speaking of legend, Johnny B. Good, Roll Over Beethoven is kind of can't get past that big of a legend. So Chuck Berry, rest in peace, my man.
Yep. There, it makes sense. I mean, we used to blame it on 2016 last year, so I don't think it's necessarily the year. It's just these are older men now. So,
are you saying it's not the actual 365 days fault? It's not like just the rotation of the earth around the sun that's to blame?
Yeah, it's the passing of time. So in a way, it is the rotation of the earth and the passing around the sun, because as the days go by, one's life goes on to the end. Anyway, that was very dark. It's a very dark way to start our damn Monday.
Hey,
but
happy St. Patrick's Day Monday. If you're hungover from either your party on Friday or the parade yesterday, well, welcome. Great beginning of the show.
Exactly. Welcome back to the cheerful Canadians talking about football. All right, that's speaking of Canadians talking about football, though, we wanted to start today with what I thought. There was an article in the Hamilton Spectator that came out yesterday that is probably the most concrete report I have ever read in the mainstream, saying definitively that the Canadian Premier League is a real thing. Now, we've known this within the circles of that we run in, the bubble, as we call it, for quite a while now. But to see it that black and white in the Spectator was something that really jumped out at me, Kevin. And to quickly summarize the article, there wasn't a lot of new information, again, to the bubble people out there, but they did mention that there were 10 teams interested. They did confirm that Bob Young would be the owner of the Hamilton franchise and that it would play at Tim Hortons Field, which is where the Hamilton Tiger Cats play. They did underline the ideas that it would be primarily CFL sort of ownership that was going around there. We had Regina mentioned again, which is, I've had trouble finding concrete information about the Regina team since the get-go, so it was nice to see it in there. There were a couple other things there too. They did say the one thing that was new to me is that Victor Montagliani said that it was FIFA approved now. So they've obviously had this conversation
as a Premier League too. So as a Premier League of the Canadian Canadian country, Canada. It's called Canada. Yeah. So as a Premier League of Canada.
Yes, exactly. And that was a bit of a new information there. And they did actually refer to Bill Manning's comments indirectly. And a couple things on that one. He unequivocally said that the TFC was supportive of the idea in every private and public conversation that they've had, but that they may have problems, quote unquote, with some of the details in it. And then he said, that's fine because some people are going to have disagreements over details, but he did underline that. I think what he was saying in that details is that we'll go to Toronto if we want to because it's our league. And he also said, and I thought this was interesting, and this is the one thing I do like about about Victor and how he approaches these kind of issues is he said, look, there's no other country in the world where this would even be a question. And no offense to the leagues that operate in our country, which is rhetoric stated in a way that would not have been stated just 5 or 6 years ago. They would have called it MLS. They would have called
5
it
or 6
the
years
D1
ago,
team.
like 2 years ago. But you mentioned the strong wording, Duane. What really interests me though is you mentioned it's the change of the status quo. So of course the players that are already playing the game in the country right now, you change the status quo, you shake the cage, you rattle the cage a little bit, you're bound to make people uncomfortable, uncertain, worried about a situation because you change the status quo, you change how things were done of the last few years and decades almost when it comes to Toronto. So of course you're going to have people that are not necessarily behind the project 100% or some of them 75%. And the wording, like you mentioned by Victor Matagliani in the article, is kind of reassuring where it doesn't matter. We don't, this project doesn't need everyone to agree with it.
No, I mean, they just really need buy-in from the soccer community and enough people in each market to make these teams viable. And what's that mean? And we've had this debate many times before, but I think 5,000 to 7,000 would be a good crowd for this league. I think that that's possible in a city. There are 5 million people within an hour of Toronto. Surely to God, you could find 7,000 of them that are willing to go to it.
Two for Montreal. So we talked a lot about like the failures of FC Montreal, and is it possible to have a second team in Montreal? It would have been a third if FC Montreal would have kept being in Montreal, basically existing. But I believe there's the same option. There's almost 2 million. And if you add like all the possibilities, 1 hour, 2 hour drive, there's a lot of possibilities in Montreal / or greater Montreal region to have a team and to be supported. It's going to take work. It's going to take grassroots work, development, season ticket sales, making a network of connections, having the local soccer association be involved. But the work needs to be done. And you just saw, like, it's funny, we talked about this today. Yesterday, I saw people in Halifax, the Wanderers, already rocking their scarves and getting ready for what could be the first professional soccer team in the Maritimes. There's a lot of potential with this league. And you know what? People are telling themselves, enough is enough. I'm getting behind this. I'm getting ready. And the supporters group are popping here and left and right, just like a pop-up shop, and coming in and being ready for what could be 2018, 2019. We don't know yet, but a rollout of 2 years again, it could be fascinating. And it's about time that we stop taking the negative. Oh, what if that? What if that? We should just go with it.
Yeah, look, the Halifax stuff's interesting too. There was an article at Halifax as well that I should have mentioned, but I think, and I said this before, I really have a lot of hope about those markets like Halifax. Like, I'm worried about the business side in Halifax, but if they can get that taken care of, I think the fan base has.
I'm worried about how they'll get people in the stadium in a timely fashion if we go back to 2015 and the Women's World Cup.
Yes, Moncton, of course, there where they. Yeah, I lived in the Maritimes for a while, so anyway, we'll just leave that well enough alone. I think there's enough capable people that they can figure that stuff out, but nonetheless, the point being that the markets, those mid-sized markets, we'll call them, have that potential to really grab a hold and have those markets accept this as a major thing. The problem in Montreal, in Toronto, in Vancouver is that obviously there is an alternative there that is going to be perceived quite rightly, at least in the initial, as being the bigger one. But nonetheless, I think the answer here in Toronto, and I'll repeat myself again, and I think this would apply to probably Montreal and Vancouver as well, is to go hyper-local, to try and associate a team with a part of the city and really go after that.
The Yorkville Lynx or the Yorkville St. Pat's or whatever. Make it something similar that goes back to the history of the city in a different. The Distillery District Lynx. I don't know. Something similar. Maybe not as hip, but the Jane and Finch Wanderers. I don't know, something similar.
There you go, the Jane and Finch. That would be an interesting. The Rexdale.
Hey, speaking of hostile environment.
Yeah. Jane and Finch, for those that don't know, is a notorious neighborhood within the city of Toronto where there's a lot of big apartment buildings there. Let's just say that. Anyway, my favorite name, and just a name that I pulled completely out of my elbow, is Toronto Danforth Football Club.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to make the Danforth Heroes.
Yeah, so you make them Toronto Danforth, you put them in Greek colors, and sort of play that up a little bit. I know not
And you
everyone
have them
likes
not scoring goals, but not conceding or winning goals without having a shot on net.
There you go. There you go. And I know people resist the idea of going ethnic, and I agree to that to a point. I think that you could wink at the ethnicity of a neighborhood without necessarily calling it the Toronto Greeks or something like that, right? I mean,
we're looking at you, Toronto, Croatia.
Yeah, the Metro's Croatia. You're 1976 Soccer Bowl champions.
Hey, wait, yeah, exactly. And was it one of the last few teams that were honored last year for some? I can't remember why, but I think it was for the '76 championship. Actually, yeah, 30 years later.
Yeah,
40 years later.
TFC, under Bill Manning, under their new leadership, this is somewhat as an aside, has decided to embrace the past of soccer in the city. We're not quite stitching 50 years consecutive for TFC on our jerseys like certain other clubs in this country that have artificial history that way. But
Vancouver.
But nonetheless, they are embracing a little bit more. The Wall of Honor that opened up earlier this year does actually have the Toronto Metro's Croatia Championship listed on it as a Wall of Honor, which I don't know if I 100% agree with that one or not, but nonetheless, it is there, and I do think it's good to honor them nonetheless. Whether or not you put them on a TFC Wall of Honor is the question, but that's getting as an aside. Kevin, the one worrying thing, I guess, in the article was the fact that Victor continues to refuse to give a date on this, and there comes a point where you wonder when you're outside it a little bit, and even those of us that have more information than others are still outside, and we don't quite know what's getting discussed in these board meetings. He said it would be discussed at the next board meeting the next week, and I've been told again that it's soon, it's soon, but there comes a time when you hear it's soon so many times that you go, like, define soon.
And soon as in like this century, or soon as in like this month?
Yeah, because that is what I find, and then look, and I'm eager for selfish reasons too. Obviously, I'm interested in potentially finding work with them. We'll say it just outright, but nonetheless, that's
work or coverage.
Yeah,
work, or at least we're going to talk about it here.
Well, I mean, it's going to be ultimately, and that is, like, putting my personal stake aside, it's going to create a trickle down throughout the entire industry, right? And like, I joke about this, that you see people when I'm running in League One circles that they talk about this all the time, and they talk about sort of trying to prepare themselves and get ready to maybe get set up to find work on the technical side, on a administrative side, on a media side. There's so many different opportunities it's going to open up. And once those opportunities open up, they trickle down, right? So then the clubs that they leave and the positions that they leave are going to fulfill. So it will create a lot of opportunity, not just for players. And that's an important consideration that I think a lot of people miss. It's going to create administrative jobs. It's going to create technical jobs. It's going to create, like I said, media jobs that are going to be, that are needed badly in this industry, in this country.
Media jobs, which are needed badly in this industry. Just take a look at the newspaper industry in the last few years across Canada. Hello to all our friends and colleagues and collaborators of the show who actually lost their employment over the last few years. But when you're looking at Duane, let's be conservative here. 15 to 20 hired position outside of players per team wouldn't seem like logical. Not too much. Times 10. Talk about 200 jobs maybe in the soccer world in Canada. It's pretty significant, I would say.
And even if you're someone out there listening that's in the soccer world and you don't get a job at the league level, then there's going to be people are going to leave jobs to go to those jobs, and those jobs are going to become available. And there are, club jobs and things across the board. And I think it creates a trickle down too, that if you have a healthier system, then the clubs are going to thrive more too. So you might even create more jobs down the line. So it's vital on a lot of different levels. And we're all very much looking forward to it. And we just hope it gets going sooner rather than later. And that's kind of where we're at with that. But
but in the meantime, Duane, what's interesting though? We actually have soccer teams in Canada that all played this weekend, and even two played against each other.
Exactly. And we'll talk about that in the break. And we also, last thought on that, and I've said this before too, if you're really, really frustrated about the fact that the Canadian Premier League is dragging its feet, in your opinion, there are local teams out there that are below the MLS level. They're even below the pro level. You can get semi-pro teams in much of this country. Go out and support them this year if you want to support the local game, Kevin. But let's take that break now, and we'll come back and we'll do a Canadian review.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The Canadian Review on the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast.
That little delay between the end of the first bumper and the Canadian Review intro there, it gets me every time. Although I caught myself one half word in this.
Hey, I am grateful for our mute button on my side to be able to not worry about this. And you know what? I'm sorry too, because I kind of put the bumpers really quickly next to each other so the listeners don't have to listen to nothing. So there you go.
There you go. All right, we'll talk about the Vancouver-Toronto game second. We'll start with Montreal's game this weekend. Kevin, just quick thoughts on that before we get into the derby.
You can read my article on CanadianSoccerNews.com called Happy with the Point. It's a game where it's not easy. New York City FC were firing on all cylinders after their 4-0 victory at home against DC United. They looked the part. They were masterful in the midfield. This time around, David Villa didn't have it as easy. Yeah, he was instrumental in Wallace's goal that wrapped up the first half. But for Montreal, the play of Patrice Bernier, Bernardello, which was a little deeper than usually in the midfield, Callum Malice late substitution to the starting 11 of Marco Donadel. Marco Donadel felt something during the warm-up and was substituted, which meant Bernardel was a little deeper and Patrice Bernier a little higher. And that created for a whole lot of success in the midfield, where a sombrero to Pirlo. So if you haven't seen this, just type Bernier Pirlo. It's the first thing that pops up. You see a bewildered Pirlo when you realize what just happened to him. It takes him about a second and a half after Bernier is gone with the ball. He's like, man, he just sombreroed me. Yep, welcome to Major League Soccer, Pirlo. You've been here for a while, but that's a little discovery that you made Patrice Bernier world class, a great performance. Yeah, the first game wasn't easy for anybody, especially in the midfield. But in the last 2 weeks, Duane, I've spoke about it last week, the passing accuracy of the midfield was a big difference, and it almost led to a victory for the Montreal Impact after the tying goal at the 66th minute by a great assist by Patrice Bernier. And Arturo was able to control the ball, put it down in a very difficult environment, surrounded by New York City defenders on top of the box, was able to put it down, fire a rocket, top right. Nothing Sean Johnson could do about it, and it's a tie game. Montreal even had a lot of chances after by putting some pressure late on New York City FC, which were tired, and that happened because Montreal were not rope-a-doping, but they were absorbing, and decided to attack when they had the chance, and that made for them having more stamina and energy late in the game, and that almost got them the 3 points on the road.
Yeah, precisely. You have to, I think, take a little bit more out of this game than maybe you did the previous two, particularly blowing that lead at home. Had to be very disappointing. So to get a point there, I think, is worthwhile. 2 points out of the first 3 games. I don't think anyone's happy with that in Montreal, but are you satisfied that you're seeing forward progression, that this can continue to grow?
Statistically speaking, the last 2 games for Montreal have been well executed. Yeah, lapse of judgment and moments of panic have created a loss of 2 points against Seattle at home. They were supposed to win that game technically, but would have, could have, should have, didn't. That being said, the performance of the last 2 games in the midfield, the backline's control, their discipline this time around this week, no early yellows, no players on notice that can then not react properly. And on a small pitch like at Yankee Stadium, you're put in position where one of your tackles could be considered a yellow card more often, just because the field is smaller and you actually have more duels during those types of games. And Montreal coming out of it with barely unscathed in the discipline part. No defender got a yellow. This is important because it was a problem before with Laurent Simon, Duval. Camara already had 2 in a red and was suspended for the second game. This time around, Montreal were able to hold on. Only Bernardello got a yellow. And this week, actually, Duane, this is an overall comment. There's been a little, like, I don't know if it was a directive. Maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe it's pure, by pure happenstance. But there were less yellow cards this week. Yeah, less early yellow, especially than in the first 2 weeks of play this year.
Yeah, the RSL game, if you watched it, had quite a few in it, and they were complaining the entire time about that one. But if you watch the broadcast, you'll know what I mean. But nonetheless, you're right. I think overall the referee maybe toned it down a little bit. It was a Galaxy 2-1 win over RSL. There was a red card by Carl Beckerman and the 2 yellows in the first half. And
that's something you don't see often. Carl Beckerman taking 2 yellows in 20 minutes and not even 10 minutes and getting sent off. It's something that was weird. And like I said on the MLS postgame show, shameless plug, you can find it on Sports Podcasting Network. It's weird for RSL, but let's go back to Montreal and New York City FC. Duane, at one point, that performance in the midfield, yes, Mancosu is not working right now after 3 games. There's other options, but you have to be content with the result. The matter, the way it happened, like the journey to the end, the journey to the destination, which was the result, was positive for the last 2 games, and it's something to build on. So it is still positive, even though Montreal is 8th in the standings right now.
Yeah, no one really running away with anything right now, though. If you look at the standings, it's week 3, so that's be realistic here. Montreal only has the 2 points, but they're only 4 points out of first place. So early days indeed. Kevin, you mentioned Bernier and Pirlo. I was wondering when I meant to bring this up earlier. I was wondering whether he had been listening to the Extra Time Radio preview where they had their Old Man of the Year award, and they decided to give it to Pirlo. But Matt Doyle gave a nod to Bernier, calling him Old Man Strong, which I thought was a funny little term. Also, Patrice Bernier is not an old man; he's an old soccer player.
Well, yes, and even in today's standards, he's not that old. And look at his performance over the last 2 weeks. It's masterful. It was a masterclass. A little deeper last week, a little higher this week. But assists galore, 2 last week, 1 this week, 3 points in 2 games for Patrice Bernier. And more than that, a performance, a confident inducing performance, not just for him, but the midfield. And it's interesting for Mauro Biello too, because the adjustment during this game were a lot more game focused than planned, you can say. And sometimes when in a place like Yankee Stadium, you kind of have to react to like the field, the smallness, the size of the field almost changes every aspect of the game, makes everything more reactionary. And even the substitutions and the way he handled Mauro Biello, the play of his midfielders, keeping Bernier there to make him control the pace of the play in the midfield and able to pinpoint either the flanks with Argiro and Piatti or a potential through ball to Mancosu. No, it was a masterclass of Patrice Bernier in the midfield. He was the best player of both teams on Saturday. So that's a big statement when you're playing with versus Pirlo and, well, not necessarily Pirlo, but more David Villa.
Yeah, well, Pirlo's, the ghost of Andrea Pirlo, I think, is what you're playing out there. But yeah, nonetheless, speaking of Pirlo, which Buffon, almost 40,000 minutes for Uwe, became the all-time leading minute leader this week. Wanted to give that one a quick mention because I think that's a real cool task.
And he wants to keep on playing. So maybe he's going to play another year. Maybe he'll make it to another World Cup.
I think that's probably what's in the back of his mind. He's also another funny stat. Italy has called up 3 keepers for their current camp. Pirlo is 2 years older than the combined age of the 2 compatriot cities there.
Yeah, Buffon. Yeah. That's crazy. Pirlo is too, but Buffon didn't know. So.
Oh, sorry, Buffon. Yeah, Pirlo's not there. He is now retired from international football.
Speak of Italian, this time around, the small Italian, Giovinco, did not even make the trip, Duane, and that's what we talked about last week. Why make him make the trade and then make him rest at home? And Toronto found a way to go to Vancouver, get a great result. Good victory. Osorio, great play on that ball to Altidore for the second goal.
Oh, yeah. No, that was a beautiful second goal there. Well, both the goals were nice, and they were against 10 men. So we will talk about Breccia in a minute. But
what the Breck?
Yeah. That was, and it was a look to Vancouver fans listening out there, and I know we have a few. It was a bit soft. I don't necessarily think that you should be getting a second yellow for lipping off. I think maybe at the professional level you should have thicker skin. That said, I don't know exactly what they said to him. If you cross a line, then sure. But if he just was telling the ref, bleep off or whatever, then no, you should have a thicker skin. You're a referee, not a priest, right? Like whatever, suck it up. Nonetheless, once that happened, once the 10-man situation came down, Toronto really cranked it up and were able to break them down in a way, if you remember last year, that they really struggled. They could not adjust to 10 men for whatever. They couldn't adjust to a bunkering last year. But what really was interesting to me about this game, and I was arguing with a Whitecaps fan after the fact about what level of control Toronto had throughout this. But to me, what was impressive about this game from a TFC perspective was just how workmanlike it was for them. They were never really under pressure. The Whitecaps did not look like they could create much of anything. Toronto, yeah, they probably would have been satisfied with the draw out of it because I think that's how they're approaching this right now. But they also were confident, from my opinion, having watched this team for 11 years, that was they seemed confident in a way that I've rarely seen this club seem, that they would probably find the goal, that even if they hadn't got to 10 men, I think that they believe that they would have manufactured something eventually to get out of there with a 1-0 or what have you. I think the nil part of it is what they're focusing on, though, on the road. And it's a little hard to argue with that. If you can keep 2 clean sheets on the road, 2 out of every 3 games on the road clean sheets, you're going to go a long way in this league. So they're only on 5 points.
Yeah, but Duane, 5 points out of 9. If you would undefeated, 5 points out of 9, if you would have given this to almost any team in Major League Soccer, if not every team in Major League Soccer, before the beginning of the season, saying, look, 3 games in, you'll have 5 points, you'll be undefeated, and you're going to be okay injury-wise. There's the Javinko here, but all signs point to you'll be okay, and it's a precautionary handling of how he is. But every team would have taken those 5 points. No,
precisely. And look, 5 points on the road. Their points per game right now on the road is like it's Supporter Shield pace. That if you transfer that and put a normal sort of home pace onto a team like 1.75 points per game, I did the calculation yesterday, and keep TFC at the 5 out of 9 pace that they're currently at on the road. Which, I'm not saying that that's a sure thing by any means, but if they were to do that, they would get 58 points, and that's in the conversation for the Shield. 60 is generally what you need to win the Shield. So that's kind of where we're at here. And look, Josie, man, I think he's going to have a monster year if he doesn't get maimed this week with the U.S. national team. But Klinsmann's gone now, so I think we're safer than we might have been in the past. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. But just go on Vancouver side here for a second. Unfortunate result for Vancouver 2 weeks in a row. I do feel that Vancouver, there's still some positive. If you go back to last week, before they had that red card, they were playing in a very impressive fashion. Got 2 goals up on San Jose. Yes, San Jose went back to reality this week, but San Jose are playing better than expected. They're not an easy team to play, especially at home. And Vancouver were able to get 2 goals up front and not your primary scoring option. So you had work of everybody. You had contribution of everyone on the team. And yes, they capitulated and they bent and they broke, but you still saw some fight in Vancouver. And I do feel there's a lot of potential there. Yes, Freddie Montero, Alphonso Davies, Brek Shea, if he can keep his cool going forward, more than we imagined 3 weeks before the beginning of the season, before those acquisitions were made. But still, for Vancouver fan, I wouldn't press the panic button just yet. I would still wait a few weeks because I do see some positive in the way they got their goals and in the way they're creating chances. And if it wasn't for discipline, results would have been different this year.
Oh, but they're panicking. If you want to go read the big Whitecaps Twitter, it's quite hilarious right now. It's full panic mode. There's a hashtag, I forget what it is off the top of my head. There's a hashtag.
Robbo out, no?
Pardon me?
Hashtag Robbo out, no?
Well, Robbo out is out there, yeah, but there's one where it's like fans are being like sarcastically positive. And they hashtag it something along those lines. So they're giving all the reasons why they should be positive. But that's neither here nor there. No, look, I'm a little bit further down on them than you are. They look pretty flat, and to play the way they did at home against Toronto, against a rival, would have disappointed me a great deal if I were a Whitecaps fan. You should be taking the game to an away team, especially when it's a derby game. Now, look, the 1 p.m. start didn't help with that crowd in there.
Yeah, CONCACAF Champions League didn't help, I feel, too, and I think they're all in the CCL, which the sub off of Davies at the midpoint would indicate so, too.
Yeah, well, and look, and I said that last week, and some people dismissed it, but no, it's realistic, and there's a legitimate excuse in there for them to come out flat, but it's tough to go down to Mexico and to play into that environment and emotionally and mentally to sort of wind yourself back up again for again a rivalry game. And look, it was flat that way, and I sort of suggested that in our preview to it on Friday that that I thought some of the edge that might normally be there might be out just because of, it's happening early, but not the first game. Once the first game, it has a different level to it. So both teams kind of aren't firing in all cylinder yet. You're coming off the CCL. Toronto's really just interested in getting through that road trip. So there was some weirdness about this game, but nonetheless, a 2-0 win by TFC. Hard not to be satisfied with that. Kevin, let's take the break now. We'll come back and we'll talk some more.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And we're back.
Duane, we kind of had the Canadian trifecta. We talked about the Premier League, we had a Canadian review, and now we'll talk about the Gold Cup. So yeah, that's the Canadian soccer trifecta right there.
Yeah, we're going to go for the quad in the last segment, talk a little bit about the Canadian national team, men's national team, and their friendly against Scotland. Quickly, before we do get into the Gold Cup conversation, we don't really have it in the block today to go through the rest of it. You can listen to Kevin's post-game show from last night, but quickly, what else did jump out at you from the MLS weekend outside of the Canadian teams?
Portland, Houston, what a game. That was very entertaining late Saturday night. Well, it's a weekend of the penalties. That's how I dubbed it, because there was a lot of penalties this weekend, all justified, and maybe outside that Jordan Morris dive in the 20th minute versus New York on Sunday. But when the Portland-Houston game in Portland, Houston, even though they lost 4-2, they didn't really defend correctly. It was a very offensive game, and Cubo Torres and Kyoto continued to impress me. So even though they lost this game, they're finding themselves still tied for the top of the Western Conference, close to it, and they have an opportunity to continue to prove people wrong. And Cubo Torres and Kyoto, and add Alex to that mix, are having a great beginning of the season, not just creating goals, but creating a lot of chances during games that could eventually lead to more than 2 goals average, 3 goals average a game. And that could be very interesting, because then even though you might not defend correctly, if you can consistently score 3 goals majority of the time, then we will get that 3 points.
Yeah, precisely. And Portland with the 9 points off the top of the season. If you're into power rankings, I'm sure they're going to be number 1 this week. Although the top team in the East might get some votes, because they're kind of the sexy pick right now too, in Atlanta United. And that's obviously the one game that jumped out at pretty much everyone, for them to go in and knock Chicago down as easily as they did. A Chicago team that is on 4 points, so they were hardly, going into the game. They would have been
a red card at the 11th minute, so they were playing with 10 men for 80 minutes.
Yeah, no, precisely. So that was the factor there, and that's why I'm still hesitant to completely buy into this idea that Atlanta United is a competitor for first place in the conference. I don't believe that. I believe that them blowing the lead against the Red Bulls is a greater indication of where they are. They play TFC in 3 weeks' time, 2 game weeks, because TFC has the bye week this week. That one, the second home game at BMO Field, is going to be very intriguing to me, because you are talking about the defending Eastern Conference playoff champions. Atlanta will be coming in on the road. That is going to be a good test, a good measure for them. If they go compete with TFC that night, maybe get a result in there, then for sure, I'll buy into them a little bit more than they are right now. But
Josef Martinez, 5 goals in 2 games, Golden Boot of Major League Soccer right now. A player that everybody was kind of disappointed after week 1. Well, I know people jumped to conclusion way too early, but Josef Martinez now, after 3 games, 5 goals. Almiron playing solidly too. You kind of have the start still, like you mentioned. There's a caveat. Their opposition have been not the strongest, and the circumstances surrounding the opposition as well. But Atlanta United, 11 goals this season, 10 in the last 2 games, 5 for Rollins Martinez. You're looking at an offense that now you can say it's almost proven, but still the defense consistency and those type of questions need to be answered if they are be taken for real to be top of the Eastern Conference, where they are right now.
Martinez, my pick for newcomer of the year in my preseason prediction. So we'll just remind you that one. quickly, and then we'll move on and get into the Gold Cup conversation. The other game that jumps out at me for a negative reason is Columbus beating DC 2-0. Not so much the Columbus side. I mean, 2-0, whatever. But
and 2 PKs, by the way, but the PKs were created by great opportunities by Columbus. The give and go, Higuain, Kamara tripped on the box twice. Once literally tripped, and the other one pushed off the ball and he fell. But 2 penalties converted by Columbus, but they were deserved from the run of play.
Yes, but what jumps out at me is DC United. If you go in that goals for column, still on a 0, 3 games into the season, 1 point, a 0-0 draw, obviously. This is a tough start for a DC United team that a lot of people had pegged a little bit higher up the standings, Kevin. All right, let's move on to my Gold Cup conversation. Victor Martegliani spoke to the Jamaican Gleaner last week and let it slip that they are looking to expand. Well, they're going to expand, not looking to expand. They will expand the Gold Cup to 16 teams in 2019. This whenever they announce an expansion of anything in CONCACAF, it always sort of gets the big countries sort of frustrated by that because they feel that they have to play more minnows and that it's not worth their time and et cetera, et cetera. But I think if you go from 12 to 16, as Martegliani said in that article, you look at a team like Trinidad that didn't even qualify for this year's Gold Cup and they're in the hack. So obviously you add a team like that. You've got, some of those teams that have done well in the past that aren't back. You could find 4 other teams to fill that out. And more to the point, though, if you're going to have a Confederation Cup, then you need to have more of your confederation participating in it. You need to give more teams a chance. And I think that the more teams a chance is what this is kind of about. If you add 4 more teams, it's going to add probably Central America and Caribbean or where they will add them from. And it's just going to give some of those smaller nations, your Antiguas, your Bermudas, it's going to give them more to play for.
So all you're saying is give team a chance?
Yeah. Look, if you are Antigua, if you are Barbados, if you are, hell, even, countries like Haiti and Jamaica and Trinidad and that, they may have aspirations beyond a Gold Cup, but most of those Caribbean nations really making a Gold Cup is the realistic ceiling that they have. So I think that the more legitimate they can make that competition, the better it is. What I didn't hear from Victor, and some people will be disappointed with this, and you factor this in with the Knoble announcement of where the 2019 Copa America will be, and the fact that they're going to go to 2020 and then go on a 4-year cycle from there. So they're going to have a Copa America in 2019 and 2020, and then 24, 28, so on and so forth to correspond with the Euros. The fact that they didn't mention another combined, like the Centenario, which is how this show launched, by the way, which was the first show we ever did, was talking about the Copa Centenario. And in the rate, the Centennial Cup. But we didn't hear another nod to that. That doesn't mean that we won't get them moving forward, but as of right now, we're still talking about separate Gold Cups and Copa Americas, and that's going to disappoint some people. And Victor also shot down the idea of having a combined confederation that would try and qualify together. And I think that he's got to play a little politics there. Again, to go back to your Bermudas and your Jamaicas and those kind of countries, they don't want any part of having to go through Brazil. So really, that's a non-starter. And with the Confederation, like the Caribbean Confederation, Caribbean countries threatening to pull out recently, there are things that I think politically need to be done to keep them on side. Kevin.
Yeah, no, I agree. But the gap of competition between CONCACAF and CONMEBOL is still so big, so huge, that the idea of having more like the Centennial Cup last year is not nick in the bud, but almost, because of outside of Mexico and United States, the rest will just be very big blowouts, and that is not necessarily good for anyone. So there is that aspect of getting CONCACAF. But if CONCACAF do have more tournament involving CONMEBOL, maybe the team will get better. It's the chicken and the egg question, and even though the egg probably came before the chicken, it's really hard to get some proof.
I'll add Costa Rica to your list for right now, but in terms of
fair enough, yeah,
how sustainable they are long term is the question. I mean, Costa Rica is up there with the 2 at the moment, but again, this could be a generational thing more than a systematic thing. So it's hard to place them in the same category.
And Costa Rica can give big thanks to Major League Soccer for helping develop their players.
Precisely. They've done Major League Soccer has been better to Costa Rica than Canada, arguably. So there you go. The other interesting story that came out of that is that Victor bandied around this idea of creating a quote-unquote League of Nations. So what I took that to, there were very little details about this, but what I took that to mean is that you would create an annual competition during the friendly dates between, probably put them into groups or whatever, and you would have, countries in the region that has struggled to find friendlies consistently would sign up for this thing, and then they would have games to play. I'm thinking as a Canadian here that this isn't the worst idea I've ever heard, even for Canada to participate in that. Yes, you want to occasionally go play Scotland or go play, Bulgaria or something, which is what they do. And occasionally you want to do that. But having more games against El Salvador, against Jamaica, against teams like that isn't the worst idea. And if you put it into some kind of quasi competition, an annual competition, to put a little bit more of a jive on it, a little bit more of a cachet on it, then I'm all for that. And if I would love to see, let's say 16 teams create up the CONCACAF League of Nations. They play on friendly dates, and then the winner of 4 groups of 4, so the winner of the groups of 4, semifinal, final, and then each year you would have a League of Nations champion. It would give you something. Realistically, it wouldn't be that meaningful, but it would still feel like it was a little more important than a friendly, and I kind of like the idea. But again, short on details in the article that we saw.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it will be something to keep an eye on, and we will keep an eye on it, like always, here on Soccer Today.
Exactly. Quickly before we get going, we wrap the segment up here. The Gold Cup is upcoming very soon, relatively. Yeah, it's actually coming up quite soon. But we got CONCACAF qualifying this week with the Canada playing Scotland. Only 5,000 tickets sold in that Scotland game.
Yeah, it's, the Tartan Army, the supporters group, actually are snubbing the game too.
Yep. So it's going to be a bit of we're used to playing in empty stadiums here in Canada.
But you know what? It's historical. So we're making history in a way because it will be the least attended Scotland game in the last 100 years.
Yeah, there will be some Voyageurs there. I know Jamie McLeod, the quasi-president of the Voyageurs. I was talking to him on the weekend. He is flying over for the match. I know that guys like Young Sam and that, if you're listening out there, Young Sam, who's not that young anymore, will probably take the trip up from London, the UK branch. There are quite a few Voyageurs in the UK, so hopefully we'll see a good 10, 20 people in the crowd representing the red and white at the very least. So if the Tartan Army can't be there, at least the Voyageurs can, because what does the name of Voyageur mean?
They travel a lot.
Exactly. All right, let's cut it now. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about that friendly and maybe set up the CONCACAF stuff as well.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Well, welcome back. All right. Well, quick little segment on the international friendly coming up on Wednesday. We'll focus more on Canada today. We'll get more into the CONCACAF stuff in more detail as the week progresses because, we have a little more time for that. But Canada did announce its roster for the friendly in Scotland. Kevin, it is a young team. 7 of the players are under 24. It is a team that is mostly experimental, I would say. I mean, Atiba Hutchison's not going to play anything like this. Junior Haddad is, however, but more or less, this is a lot of guys that I think it's more of a roster to sort of look at players to see whether we can find some more depth for that Gold Cup this summer. Anything in particular you're seeing from this roster?
Yeah, like this is not the Octavio Zambrano debut of an era. No. This is going to come this summer. What this is the end of the Finlay era, probably, and the just laying the groundwork, giving everybody a shot, giving people an opportunity, a stage where they can perform. That's what it is. You're decent opposition, so whatever Canada do in that game will either be impressive or realist, and that could be beneficial for the future for some players for depth this summer or for the next cycle. So it's like almost an introduction for some players, but more, I believe, a way to leave a legacy of, look, I'm giving you guys the last game, show what you can do. Maybe the upcoming management will like what they see.
Yeah, and look, probably the Junior Roulette and Scott Arfield are involved in this. And Arfield, I think that they might have let him out if it wasn't for the fact that they were playing Scotland, and I think it has some importance for him to play against his native land. So that would be something that they would have given him to. Adam Straith this is in this as well. They were already over there, though, right? Edmonton is training. They just are getting back now, but they were training in the UK. So to keep him around when they're right there anyway, it makes a lot of sense. Ben Fist, it's probably the same reason.
And obviously, Arfield, it's easy. Just takes a train from Burnley to Scotland, to Glasgow, and to get to the game.
Yeah, and if you look at the roster, there are, in fact, a lot of people that are UK-based in this, or Scotland-based even, and why not call them in at that point to have a good look at them? I'm looking through this thing here real quick to see if anything really. Simeon Jackson making a return is something that's interesting to see again. It's a player that I think we'd all like to see return to some level of form, but I'm not all that hopeful, to be honest with that. This is by far... This is a B lineup. Like, let's just put it out there. As much as Canada can have a B lineup, this is one. Scotland for Canada is the decent opponent. They're obviously at a bit of a down cycle for themselves. When you said a decent opponent earlier, I imagine some Scots spit their tea out if they were listening. But nonetheless, when you're talking about Canada here, that this is about the right level for them to play. I don't have a lot of expectations about this game, though, other than to get a run out and to get all of these players seen and evaluated appropriately for this summer's Gold Cup, which is really what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a stepping stone. It's a exhibition match. It's a friendly.
Yeah. U23 roster named as well. Look, what are you going to say about this? This is an evaluation roster. This is something for people to have a good look at, sink their teeth in. They'll be playing in Qatar. Kevin Alleman makes his return back to a national team setup. Interesting that he's going back at a U23 level after having played for the full national team, but he is a guy that, with the Saprissa now, that a lot of people, especially in the Voyageurs board, really were excited to have back. My friend Mark Anthony Kay makes his debut at a national team level, and I'm kind of excited for him. He's a good guy. I've had conversations with him before on the show. We had a conversation with him, so that was something that I'm happy to see anyway.
I think there's something to say about Kevin Allen going back at the U23 level. There's something about playing well, playing in a dominant fashion against international opposition, whatever the level is. And if he can have that opportunity and those performances, even if it's a U23 level, it might be beneficial for his development for himself going forward. Then go with the national team and play, example, Scotland friendly or another possibilities in the next few weeks. I see the benefit of him going back to U23 and having the chance to continue to dominate and to have not that it's going to be a man against boys, but his opposition that he does face in Costa Rica on a day in, day out basis, just on training basically, is at a pretty high level. And he can replicate that at the international level, national team level here under 23. It could be beneficial for him.
Yeah. Crepeau and Carducci, the two keepers. Carducci, unfortunately, unattached now because Vancouver, like Toronto, decided to cut their Canadian kid and go with the American draftee. And don't get me going on that. But nonetheless, I don't get Bono. I just don't get him. Anyway, others do. Jordan Hamilton in this mix. Nice to see him get some time after what was a great preseason. But unfortunately, when you're behind Josie Altidore, it's going to be tough to get some minutes.
You're not going to play a lot. Canadian Championship, here you come, Jordan Hamilton.
I don't know what to do with Hamilton, whether or not, I think he needs some TFC 2 time for sure. But at the same time, I don't know. That's a tough one for
you loan him out in the NASL, USL, and at the team level, so he's like the first pick, and it's kind of tough too because if you loan him out, it's still a demotion in the mind of him or the player. So it's interesting what you can do. Yeah, true.
Yeah, I'm actually. You can actually loan a player within the league. It's rarely used, but I almost, with a guy like Jordan Hamilton, would rather see him loaned out to another MLS team for a while. As absurd as that might sound to people, I'd rather see him get time, and then TFC should keep their interest in him because he's, I think, a valuable prospect. But Josie's not going anywhere for a while, and as long as he's around, and Javinko as well, you're behind Javinko and Josie, and Tosin Ricketts, a veteran who's shown to be a great spark off the bench for them. So I don't know where the hell this kid gets playing time other than the Canadian Championship, like you said. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but it will be nice to get him a game. All right, moving on to real quickly, we'll just touch on the U.S. and their injury problems. They're making a lot of changes to that roster. Should they be worried about this? This is maybe their most vital week in quite some time, I would have to say.
Yeah, and the preparations for those very important World Cup qualifiers. It is, and yeah, you're right. You're having an MLS focus roster, Kleshtan back in the fold, and Dempsey. So it will be fascinating to see how Bruce Arena manages that roster because of the injuries. Maybe you'll see players giving an opportunity where maybe they wouldn't have if it wasn't for injury. So, but at least Altidore is going to be a big part. Bradley. So you do have the TFC contingent healthy this time around.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday, March 24th. That will be against Honduras, World Cup qualifying game there. Maybe the biggest game they played in Italy. Well, outside of a World Cup.
Considering their early performance in the Hex, this is an important game. Yes.
The U.S. is not. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say they played more important games, but because of the situation where they need to turn things around, and this is the first competitive game at that level for the return of Bruce Arena, it is that important.
Yeah, look, they're not in trouble now, in my opinion, based on the fact that they have played 2 of their 3 hardest games already. They're in trouble in the sense that they haven't, they're where they are in the standings. But if they were to not get a result against Honduras, and I fully expect they will, but if they were to not, then they're in trouble. They're in trouble to legitimately qualify if they lose the game. I don't think they will. If they draw that game, they're probably looking at 3rd or 4th at that point, especially if the other results don't go their way. But if they were to lose that outright, then yeah, you can really start to press the panic button. But that said, under a more pragmatic Bruce Arena, under a more uniform U.S. camp right now, although the Bedoya Josie stuff might cause some feathers to be ruffled, I do anticipate that they will turn it around and will get the job done. It's once you get to a Hex, it is, for a country like the United States, it is almost more difficult to not qualify than it is to qualify, right? Like it's a very forgiving format.
Yeah, because it's a lot of games, but not just that. You can lose a couple that could happen now and still eke out the result that you need to finish, like you mentioned, 3rd or even 4th, but then you'll give New Zealand a thrashing and qualify for the World Cup. So there's always that aspect. And if it's not New Zealand, well, you're talking about even bigger thrashing.
I believe it is Asia that they would be playing. So you're talking more like Bahrain.
Okay. There you go.
You might get, I don't know. I haven't followed Asian qualifying close enough. Maybe I'll have to have a look. And I'm pretty sure that's who it was. Forgive me if I'm wrong, guys. No, it was New Zealand last time. And I know that they didn't get Oceania this time. But I also know that it's not South America. So, and I'm pretty sure it's not Asia. So that they're Africa. So that would leave Asia. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. All right. Kevin, any final thoughts on the day before we say goodbye?
Well, stay tuned all week, 10 a.m. This week. You can listen to us live. And if you have any questions, comments, you can let us know by email, sportspodcastingnetwork@gmail.com, and on social media, Twitter, Soccer Today, SPN, and at SportsPodNet. And until tomorrow, once again, 10 a.m. for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. Have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.